Welcome, everyone. I'm so sorry for the slight delays in getting this started. I think you're all aware of the tech issues that we experienced this morning. And the email from Eventbrite didn't go out until bang on 10, but we were just trying to keep you on your toes, make sure that everyone's really hyped up for day 4 of the festival. So thanks for your patience. If we need be, we can just add a few minutes onto the session to make sure that we get back time, but I'm aware that some of our speakers do have to run off at 10, so we'll do our best. So welcome. This is the Making Local Food Resilience a Reality session, where we're hearing from different groups that have received funding through the Building Local Food Resilience Beyond COVID-19 financial support round that Food Power ran in January, and we supported 15 different groups with financial support to deliver pilot projects and other projects to help build local food resilience beyond COVID-19. So we're going to be hearing some of those today. And we'll have a chance for Q&A, and then hopefully everyone can go on their merry way to the Wonder Space, where we will also, Simon will be having a cup of tea and hoping that other people join him for a chat on day 4 of the festival. So if you haven't used the Wonder Space yet, it is fun, though I may be biased. So do go along and check it out. Simon's giving all the thumbs up. He's very excited to talk to you, so please do go along. Okay, so yeah, just to flag that the Building Local Food Resilience Beyond COVID-19 round of financial support was all about kind of recognizing that there's been a lot of emergency response over the past year during the pandemic, and that we needed to think about going back to the purpose of Food Power and thinking about how we build beyond the food bank and build local food resilience and figuring out what that looks like. So we had a 29 applications, and as I say, we supported 15 different organizations with their projects. So this session we'll be hearing from 5 of the organizations that have received funding, who'll be talking about their work, and you can then ask questions. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Sonia from Foodwise Leeds.
Good morning, thank you. Can I have my slides, please? Thank you for having us here today. So we received funding back in January to build a building food resilience toolkit. Leeds had a fantastic provision of emergency food over the course of the pandemic, setting up 27 community care hubs across the different wards across the city, working with locally based partners. This was overseen by Leeds City Council. But we felt that it was time to move on, like there was a need for this, the situation was changing. And we felt that people needed to move from emergency and crisis support to pathways of independence. We took inspiration from Megan Blake's Food Ladders, but we felt for Leeds it made more sense to talk about pathways, as there are many different pathways and it was less hierarchical. And we also feel that the different pathways all lead to Rome. Next slide, please. So why a toolkit? So as I said, we had this excellent emergency provision, but the landscape was changing. A lot of money had been pumped into this emergency provision. There was lots of food that was there from DEFRA as well. And there was a dependency that was building on this food. And also some of the food was not appropriate. It was not right. We wanted to take a citywide approach. We wanted to work with partners across the city and just have a shared vision for building this pathway to greater food resilience and supporting people back to a more normalized shopping experience. We wanted to offer support to the food aid providers, making sure that they had the most effective information that they could have. And that there was a better understanding of what the root causes are, what was causing people to be in food crisis. And also really having the best knowledge on signposting available as well, so to support people on to the next steps. So our approach, we felt it was really important that anything that we did was co-produced with food aid providers. And working within the capacity of the funding and the timeframes, we felt that the best way to do this was to run a series of webinars with the food aid providers. So we ran the first webinar in March and a second one in April. And in between them, we've been having ongoing consultation with the different partners and different food aid providers. In our first webinar, it was attended by about 35 different people, food aid providers across the city. And we gave an overview of what the current food provision was and talked about why we wanted to build food resilience and what food resilience meant. And we introduced the language of food citizenship and about empowering people, and also looked at the asset-based community development approach. So believing that communities have the assets within them to find the solutions. And this language and approach was really appreciated. And because it's a lot of the food aid providers, they were starting to feel stifled by this existing approach and really wanted to develop. And so the language that we were using, the conversation we were having, it helped to empower them as well. And for some of our food aid providers, like food citizenship was not something they'd really heard about before. So it was new language. So in between the first and the second workshop, our committee worked together to design how this toolkit would look, the different sections, the information that we would need, and reached out and we're asking for input. The second webinar, we had like another, I think 35, 40 people attend as well, some of the same providers and then some new ones as well. Once again, we looked at the food supply. We talked about that importance of really having those helpful conversations and just sort of letting people know what the different sections would be. We'd heard from partners such as Fair Share and Rethink Food and Public Health, and just bringing together all the different pieces and why it was important. But it was the second part of the webinar that was really interesting, or particularly interesting, I should say. And this is where we learned from others. Can I go to the next slide, please? It was the first opportunity that we actually had to really meet from across the city and find out about what work was happening across, what other organizations were doing. So the three organizations across the top, New Wortley, Barker, and Health for All, were all working as community care hubs set up by the council to provide the emergency provision. But as they are long-standing organizations, really asset-based organizations working with their communities, they have started to develop differently and change that food provision to better meet their needs, their communities.
1 minute warning, Sonia.
Okay, very quickly. So they've started moving towards more of the pantry models, but each one is different to their different area, whether they're recipe stations or recipe cards, but it's where people are sort of paying in, there's more choice, there's wraparound service. So this seems to be the direction of travel. The food clubs, while they don't offer the services, they're working with local partners that can. And then we heard from Bradford, where they've also working with the people are paying into the credit union, so people have opportunity to save money as well. And I'll just go to the final slide, please, very, very quickly. So where are we now? The toolkit is currently with the designers today. So that's a little model of what it may look like on the left-hand side. So the online version is being finalized, and we're going to keep it as a live document so that we can update it and change it as we go along. We'll be sharing it and promoting it. It will be available through Food Power as well, so you can see what we've done and adapt it to your local area. We've got surveys that are live at the moment, one for food aid providers and one for community members to continue gathering further insight and information. And then we're also looking for some additional money because we realize we're just at the beginning of the journey of this. We'd like to do a printed version and get that distributed. We also would like to provide training to the food aid providers so they really understand how to use the toolkit and making sure that they're getting the training they need, asking the questions, understanding the importance of Healthy Start and all of that. And finally, a follow-on workshop in like 6 to 8 months from now. We want to see where things have moved, how people are moving down that pathway, how projects are developing, and what further supports is required. Thank you.
Magic. Thank you so much, Sonia. really interesting stuff happening in Leeds. Just a few things to add whilst I'm in there, whilst I'm here, is that in the chat box, please do introduce yourself if you've not already and say hello, where you're calling in from today. And we will be doing Q&A, so do put your questions in the chat box and I'll find them and we'll get to them in the Q&A section. And also all of the speakers will be talking briefly about their projects, but they will be sharing as part of their monitoring a one-page snapshot on what they've learned from the project and how it's been delivered. And this snapshot will be available in early June. So we will share that with the whole network via the Food Power newsletter and probably the Food Poverty newsletter that Sustain runs. So do look out for those. And if you want more information, those snapshots will be there. So magic. Okay, next up, we've got Rachel in Preston.
Sorry, we haven't actually got Rachel, we've got Kay.
We've got Kay.
Rachel.
Magic. Thanks, Kay.
Hi, Rachel, and I'm doing this on behalf of my wonderful colleague Rachel, who has set this project up, but she's had to work on her other job today. Did you get the presentation that I sent, Cecily?
Yes, I did. I'm happy to do it for you if you've got it up there.
Is that okay?
Because
I'm having, yeah, I'm actually in Egypt, so I'm having to speak to you from my phone, so I can't put the presentation up. So I'll introduce myself while you're doing that. So yeah, I'm Kay Johnson. I set up the larder, which is in Lancashire, and we work mostly in Preston, but we are Lancashire based, so we work across the county. And this is a little photograph of our hub in Preston. And we have, this is a space that we got 2 years ago to develop a cafe. There are 3 aspects to the larder. So we have a food academy where we do accredited and non-accredited courses, all food and health related. We have our cafe and outside catering business, which is around giving people an experience around local food. And we source all our ingredients for the cafe and catering business locally and ethically. And then we also have a procurement enterprise. And this is around trying to encourage individuals and businesses to buy locally and ethically and from the suppliers that we buy from. We work with a lot of farmers. So what Rachel has actually done is base the project around all of those 3 areas. And because we had to close last March, we haven't been able to open the cafe since then. Can I just say as well that actually our strapline is food fairness for all, and that's really important here, because what we're trying to do in all the work that we do is try and make good, healthy, fresh local produce affordable to people on low incomes without farmers and producers bearing the cost. And it's a little bit of a paradox, but it's something that we are working hard on. So what we have here is a kind of, it's a healthy, sustainable food system at a micro level. And that's what we're trying to create in Preston and then roll that out across Lancashire. So if you go on to the next slide, please, Cecily. So what we've been doing over the last year is developing some plans for this year, because everything changed for everybody last year. Can I just say that I really love the idea of the toolkit? I think that's fantastic and so needed. And I think that, you know, this problem is not going to go away. So we started making plans. So we made plans around the academy, the catering business and the procurement enterprise. And for this presentation, I'm really focusing on the work that we've been doing in the community. So what we are doing now is we have, I'm going to talk about it a little bit more in a minute, but we have a voucher scheme which we want to develop into a discounted food card that will allow people on low incomes to buy local produce without having to force the prices down, or at the moment, we've got the threat of cheap food coming in, and we really want to avoid that. We've got fantastic farmers in Preston and in Lancashire, and we really want to support them. So we want to make that available to everybody. We do a lot of social prescribing. We've been doing it for a long time. We didn't call it that, but we're now part of the Learning Together programme, which is from the National Academy of Social Prescribing. We're also heavily involved with the Food Foundation's Veg Advocate programme. Rachel and two of our volunteers. Yeah.
You've got 1 minute 30 left.
Right. Okay. Right. Just if you go on to the next slide. Okay. So what we've been doing with the funding is we started off delivering nutritious cooked meals to people in the hub. We had 200 families that have taken part in our Kids in the Kitchen programme, and that has involved getting vouchers for our ingredients that people have been buying from our markets that are sourcing local produce. And with that, we've been delivering online courses around the recipes, video recipes, and hard copies of recipes that people have been able to access. And we've been working with people individually through social media. The project now has enabled us to work with farms, and we're working with a woman called Andrea, who's one of our teachers on our cooking classes, and she's now growing for us. So she's growing specifically for our food hubs. And she's developing, with her, we're developing videos around how food is grown. We're asking all of our suppliers to take this example and grow and make little videos so that people can see where their food is coming from, developing recipes. And we're working very closely with the Open Food Network. And at the moment, they're having to look at the platform that they currently have and make changes to that so that they can adapt it, so that they can add on the recipes. So basically what we want to do is give people who wouldn't normally get access to fresh local produce an opportunity to buy it, the encouragement and support they need to be able to cook with it, and an understanding of where it comes from and why it's important. And eventually what we want to be able to do is have our own farm so that people can actually come and see where the food is grown.
Thanks, Kay. Interesting stuff happening in Preston. Okay, next up we've got Nita and Sahida, who are developing a pantry in Stockton. Over to you both.
Hi Cecily, thank you. This is going to be broken up into two sections, so I'm going to do the first bit and then I'm going to pass to Sahida. So I'll just give you a little overview. We've got no slides, and the reason for that is our Stockton Food Power Network is relatively new. We became established during COVID. Am I echoing, Cecily? Am I echoing? Sorry. We became established during COVID, so we're really only at 15 months in. The Stockton Food Power Network currently sits between the project work is delivered through our members. So we've got 30 members currently, and the key lead partners who are ourselves, Little Sprouts Health and Wellbeing, the Infinity Project, which basically support financial insecurity in the communities, and also Cultivate, which support the gardening and growing element, are the other key lead partners. We work with local authorities, so we only have a sort of part-time role in this in delivery, and local authority have a part-time role. What's happening in Stockton is the Food Power Network is evolving, and based on the work that we've achieved with Sustain and through the last 15 months, we're moving it towards an entity either with the local infrastructure organisation or Stockton Council, and that is currently under an appraisal. So our work, our Food Resilience Network in Stockton, is basically a combination of a blended approach of the two projects that have been highlighted so far. This particular project work was about looking at the long term of building community food knowledge, building skills and resources to promote healthy lifestyles and make healthy food and food accessible to all. We are, again, very new. There's 5 community shops currently in Stockton. So we were using this funding to evidence what was already in Stockton, well, who else we could work with. So we've been fortunate in that Middlesbrough Environment City, who are local to us, have shared a lot of their learning. So we've been working quite closely with their toolkits, the public health teams, the housing agencies, to get a bit of a demographic of where we need to be. We are excited that in Teesside, we are getting a new fair share hub, which will support our ongoing food insecurity in Stockton. So we will be able to access that, and it'll be in Teesside, so we'll be able to access that in Stockton. And we, with this funding, we actually have identified 3 additional community shops. One we're excited to partner with, which I'm going to pass you to the Sahida from the Amal project. But I'll give you a little bit of background on the other 3. The other 3 community shops in Stockton, which this funding will help us support from our training and also a little bit of startup. One is based in a church, and they've identified a particular gap on a weekend from support from families and their community. One is in an additional leafy community, which we are seeing a lot of free school meal provision now, and we're seeing a lot of issues regarding financial insecurity. And one is in a community in Headley that we're aware of and we've worked in before in an area of disadvantage. So what I'm saying is the blended approach to the community shop is it's not particularly in one community, it's over lots of communities. I'm happy to answer questions after, but before I lose my 5 minutes, I'd like Sahida from the Amal to tell you a bit more detail about the understanding of why we've chosen to use the funding for this project. Thank you, Sahida.
Thank you, Nita. I'd just like to start by saying the Amal Project Teesside launched as a direct result of the pandemic, because whilst working alongside Little Sprouts to do some volunteering work, I realised there was very limited support in the way of it being tailored towards the BAME community. And despite the fact that the BAME community were disproportionately affected by COVID-19, they weren't accessing food support in the same way as others were from the local community. So working with local schools who identified the most vulnerable BAME families, we launched by providing them with tailored food hampers, which has been really successful. The families have been so grateful for the kind of more thought out and tailored support. But going forward, we know that giving out free food is not really the answer to the underlying reasons that the families are in this position. So in the next few weeks, hopefully, we're working towards launching a eco shop or community shop in Stockton-on-Tees, which will have an element of it being tailored to the BAME community. It will be open to everyone, but we're going to work together with Little Sprouts to ensure that there's food items and other essential items that the BAME community need and that they're able to access. But also another part of the project we felt quite strongly and passionately about is community engagement. And we've been working quite closely with the community engagement team from the local police force, who've been our kind of delivery partners. They come along to all the deliveries we make. It helps sort of engage with some of the children and for them to see that, you know, especially where we live at the moment in Teesside, there has been an increase in hate crime. So it's a way for the families to see that, you know, the police aren't there in a negative way, they're in a positive way. They can approach them, they can speak to them. But also going forward, we would like to use the community shop as a way to engage with some of the most vulnerable and often isolated people within the community to address wider social issues such as like social inclusion, even digital inclusion, and also health and well-being issues, because especially within the BAME community, things like mental health, there's quite a lot of stigma and taboo around talking about those things, and also financial problems, because there's this kind of notion
1 minute, Sahida, sorry.
Thank you, it's okay. There's this kind of notion or feeling around especially in the BAME community, that you should be able to look after and support your own families. So there's a lot of people that are just struggling and they're not seeking support for, they feel like they'll be stigmatized, there'll be a sense of shame. So via the community shop, we want to address those issues once we've built up their trust and they know that we're understanding, because where we live in Teesside, we have, because Middlesbrough's in 2012 became a dispersal area for asylum seekers, and we have approximately 1 in 186 people are an asylum seeker or refugee, which is the highest in the UK per population rate. So that's another barrier that we've got to break down, building trust with these people, because they've been through some really awful, appalling things. So we want to be that kind of first step. And the community shop and food, we feel, is the way to sort of engage with them in an informal kind of safe way. So yeah, if anyone would like to ask any questions about that. That was really brief, I'm sorry. I was trying to stick to the time.
No, thank you so much. I think I have, yeah, no, thank you so much, Zahida. It's great to hear more about it. And there's been a question in the chat about the name of your project. So if you don't mind just putting the full name of your project in the chat box, that would be appreciated. Magic.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, both. Great to hear more about that work. And next up, we've got Brenda from Edinburgh.
Hi, everybody. I was just going to share my slides myself, if that's all right, if that works for everybody. If it will happen.
Perfect.
Okay, right, okay. Thank you so much for the last presentation. It was really nice and refreshing to see you talking so eloquently without the use of a presentation about stuff that you've been doing. So it was really inspiring. Thank you for that. You know, the presentation I've put together here today is really, you know, it kind of turns what we originally did on its head, because, you know, I've started off with a kind of headline, just for fun. Because, you know, the reason why this, the Food Family Network idea came is because we were enjoying seeing the families talking on our networks online. So, you know, was it just for fun, or did it have a real purpose? So we actually started it after we had the first round of funding from the COVID-19 response from Food Power. And we did 920 we reached 920 households across Christmas and January, with 2 household boxes, one called Green Globe and one called Blue Planet. And as part of that reach, there was closed network pages that people were discussing, you know, what they got in their box, you know, the contents, what they'd made. And there was a real opportunity here. So if you can see on the picture here, you know, a wee bit of a Facebook share that you think, right, okay, what does that have to do? And it is literally just people celebrating food out in the community. Yeah. So Edinburgh Community Food last year, we connected with 20,000 people across the city. We delivered just under 1 million meals across the city, which was, you know, a completely new concept to us. This is nothing like anything we'd done before. We had supply chains across the city. We had, you know, partnership connections, about 150 partnership connections across the city. We had 5 nutritionists working for us. As part of these connections across the city, we set up closed Facebook pages so that when people received their goods, we could give support and offer support. But we actually found these a real resource of inspiration. You know, in those dark days of lockdown, when everybody had their shoulders to the wheel, we were seeing all this peer support and all these great stories, and, you know, people sharing pictures of looks terrible but tastes great. And, you know, us as a team under stress, it really inspired us. So we thought there was more to do with this. So really what we wanted to do is we wanted to keep sharing, connect people and help people inspire other people, continue to utilise and build on what people were actually doing off their own steam largely, and utilise it to build services. So it's really about reaching people and connection and giving them the ability to influence the services going forward. So the Food Family Network will help us, and the funding will help us stay connected, share support, and to shape services across the city. And we do this in partnership with our Edible Edinburgh and through the City Council and through the 150 partners, as I was saying. Now, give you a wee sort of taste of what people share and what the reason for this. So it could be anything, it doesn't need to be, a recipe or anything. So, share, celebrate beauty, encourage somebody else. So, this is just basic sharing that we've lifted from our Facebooks with agreement. There's so they've got young people receiving their stuff in the box, colouring in, getting really involved, can't wait to get it, the resources out. Share and show, so people sharing what they've done with something that's been in their box that they've, and giving inspiration, and they've said that they're bragging about what's in their box. Then you've got this other chat here, is about a comfort chat, and it just gives people an opportunity to chat, because this chat's about bereavement, so who knew that the actual Facebook pages and these systems would be able to provide that? And look at the amount of dialogue that's going on there. There's a lot of dialogue going on. And then the other chat, I can't see what's behind this box. I just, top tips. So people just sharing what they know, what they've learned, and just sharing it with others, so making them feel good and making them feel as if they're helping others. And then other things about inspiring, helping people to start. We gave out seeds and we gave out plants, and, and it's about not just, people having a go and encouraging others to have a go. And then we've got somebody there who, this is a wee bit one that says, okay, they're going to reduce the sugar, but,
1 minute,
increase their alcohol intake. So if you look there, there's another couple, and they're just about encouraging and offering support, and then just being useful. Somebody didn't have recipes, and making, and thanking them and being useful by sharing the recipe. So Food Families Network, we're connecting 300 people across the city. We'll supply a take and make, which is a meal in a bag for 4, and we'll supply that to all the families with a questionnaire to keep these dialogues going. We'll ask in the questionnaire, we'll listen to the responses and share, but it's about sharing good practice across the city, sharing experiences, connecting people and inspiring people, and continuing to build and reach, and building that resilience, because people are supporting each other. So people want to connect. We know that connection reduces the risk of food insecurity, it increases well-being, and it forms better relationships across the city. They're less reliant on institutional support, and it grows from community, it grows from the people themselves, and it can inspire us all. And that's all I've got to say today. Thank you for listening.
Thanks so much, Brenda. A few questions popping up for you in the chat that we can come back to. And just to remind you all, if you do have questions, please pop them in the chat. And then obviously all of our speakers today are from the Food Power Network. And one of the key things about the Food Power Network is learning and sharing across the network. So I'm sure we can link you up with speakers afterwards if that's of interest. So next up, last but not least, is Ali from Southwark.
Hi, thank you. And so nice to go after Brenda, after that emphasis on connections and connection making, because that's also the core of our work. I'm going to share my screen as well here. Let me just bring that up, sorry. There we are. Can everyone see my screen? Great. So I'm Adi from Pembroke House, a community centre in Walworth, which is in the London Borough of Southwark, and we are part of the Southwark Food Action Alliance. And I'm going to be talking about our neighbourhood food model, which, as you will see in the big red letters in the corner, is a work in progress, and it will probably always be so, because we are fans of incremental improvement. I want to ask you to bear with me a little bit to talk about the context a bit before actually talking about the model, because the context is almost more important than the shape of the model itself. Before COVID, we, for a number of years, had become interested in connections. And initially, this took the form of refocusing our project. So if we had a dance class or a music session, we focused the delivery of that on the engagement of the participants with the practitioners and with each other. The teaching of that craft, being dance or music, became a tool for strengthening that engagement and those connections. And we continued with this, and after a few years, we took what was then a bold step for us of setting up a project where connection was the actual main aim, and there was no other excuse. There wasn't a dance or a music or anything else to teach. So we set up the Walworth Living Room. You see pictures of that. And we were wanting to explore how social spaces could encourage connections. The work is predicated on findings from studies that show, with remarkable consistency actually, that only 20% of people who are in acute need of a service ever access it, no matter how well funded it is and how well publicized it is. Most of us, when we have a problem, we don't think of going to a community center to access a service. We call our friends or family members. So in this space, we had staff whose jobs were to tend the edges of little activities that were going on, make connections, and they did that by setting up the space in particular ways. We worked with architecture students, for example, to look at flow and how that encourages people to meet, but also by engaging in actual conversations, not doing any referrals, but actually in person introducing people to each other. When COVID struck, we, of course, had to close the living room, but we called everyone up, and their main and overwhelming worry was about access to food. So we very quickly scrambled up a food bank, recruiting an army of volunteers to deliver food to people. And the food bank is definitely a service, and a service that's kind of anathema to everything that we stood for. So from the beginning, we were on the lookout for ways of setting it up that chimed with how we worked beforehand. So we worked with 40 local organizations who held long-term deep relationships with people, and so that the referrers to us could be made based on the pre-existing trust rather than newly set up criteria meeting a new organization. We recruited volunteers locally, and this has become an opportunity to reach out to newer residents of an area. Throughout all of this, we kept talking to people because we wanted to find out how to deepen connections that were being built in an accelerated rate through COVID and our response to it. And we wanted to find out how to create a context for these connections to flourish. And here is a write-up of one of those conversations. It's worth pointing out a little bit, talking a little bit about neighborhood. Our work spans several scales, as you see here, but the neighborhood has always been our focus, partly for historical reasons, but increasingly because we realize that the neighborhood is large enough so that you can test and learn from ideas with reasonable scale, but also small enough that interactions don't become faceless. And that's the core of our work, focusing on people as people, not as receivers of services.
1 minute, Ali.
Oh, okay, I'll be very quick. So what do we have in our neighborhood? We have 45,000 people spending roughly £10 million a year on food. And we were wondering, what can we set up to keep some of that in circulation within the neighborhood and help build and strengthen connections? We also have, as I've already talked about, a large number of partners who are experts in what they do. I will skip forward. And so here is our toolbox, and it's presented in the way that we want to think about our model, which is about circulating the flow of the assets that are already there in the community and using food as a way of doing that. So we get to the punchline slide here. The Walworth neighborhood food model. So here's what we've come up with for now. It's based around 3 sites. The Walworth living room over here that I've talked about already, where there is a community cafe and alternative models of service delivery, and where connections are made around food. We've set up the Aylesbury Kitchen with one of our partners, which is a local developer. And there we'll be working on transitioning our emergency food provision into more dignified models of access to food. So we'll have a pantry, we'll distribute Rose and Early Start vouchers, we have cooking sessions, working with local catering companies to train train up local budding chefs and set up progression routes. And most importantly, we set up connections between recipients, suppliers, and partners. And I can give examples of that if there are questions later. And finally, the front room, which is a more jazzed up version of the Walworth living room, and it's a social enterprise that's about generating long-term sustainable employment and training in the hospitality sector, catering for and keeping the connection with the new residents, and also, and importantly, keeping the flow of people and, yes, money back into the neighborhood. A plethora of other projects will then plug into this system, each doing what they're very best at, and without having to set up the entire end-to-end chain for each project, but actually working as part of an ecosystem that's already there, with supply as well. It's of course important to think of learning and measurement. So data and how you collect that on aggregate across the neighborhood and in a way that's owned by and benefits the community becomes very important. So you no longer focus on individual interventions, but on connections and long-term outcomes. But that's another talk about the Walworth neighborhood data model. So I stop here.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Ali. Someone's given you a little love heart. There's a love heart from one of the attendees, so that's good stuff.
Thank you.
Amazing. Yeah, sorry it's such a brief whistle-stop tour of what you're up to, and as I said, there will be snapshots shared and everyone is part of the Food Power Network. So if some project has really piqued your interest, then let us know and we can link you up with the presenter, with the key contact there. We do now have 15 minutes of Q&A because we're going to run until 10:05, if that's okay, just because we started a little later. So there have been a lot of questions in the chat box, quite specific for different speakers. So I'm just going to fly us back to Sonia, who spoke first. And there's a question from Cara from the Whole Food Partnership, which is that you mentioned that the Food Resilience Toolkit was one of the first opportunities you'd had as a partnership to reach out to local food providers and find out more. Can you tell us a bit more about how you built those relationships? And actually, that's a question for Sonia, but that's a question that has come up in other ones. So I think it would be great to hear more from all of you about how you built relationships with the people that your project is working with and supporting. So Sonia, we'll start with you and then anyone else can feed in.
Super, thank you. I mean, in Leeds, we do pride ourselves on our relationship working, and we do have very strong relationships working across the food sector. So that was our basis. But also, we also been partnering with Food Aid Network, who have been holding quarterly meetings with food aid providers. So they have, they've got deep tentacles into what's happening specifically on the ground. So it was through these networks that we were then able to draw people together. But it was the first format where people could really share what they were doing. So I think that's what made it unique. And it allowed for other people to come on board. And as new people come to Leeds and they want to deliver food aid provision in Leeds, they're now coming to us directly. They're being signposted to us to say, hey, we're thinking of doing this. And we can then share our city approach with them and then connect them into existing, with other partners. So we've got a very good ebb and flow in that way. It's taken years, but and we keep working at it. We keep supporting each other.
Yeah, taken years and will continue to take years to maintain and build further. Yes, understand. Sahid, Anita, did you want to come in on kind of relationship building at all? Oh,
yeah.
Anita. Oh, one of you.
Oh.
Yeah, go for it.
Anita can go first.
I would just say, really, I think in Stockton, we're quite small, very small town. So when we're looking at these bigger models with citywide approaches where they've got public health buy-in and they've got local authority buy-in and the membership alliance is stronger, I definitely feel that is something that is evolving in Stockton. The strength of COVID has meant the partnership working has got better. So that's the best thing that can happen. There was lots of models where people were doing a similar thing but didn't know how to move it forward. So that's the job of the Stockton Food Power Network, and I think it will gain more momentum as it gets its own entity. And feel really inspired looking at the bigger models, knowing that, you know, I have faith and hope that there is that opportunity. Sahida, do you want to add to that?
I just wanted to say that although we're a town and we're smaller, I feel like what we're doing is still really valuable because we're able to target our support and we're quite niche. We're picking up some of the most unrepresented people in the community. And I think if we just focused on the bigger model, those people would miss out on the help because they kind of go under the radar, and we're able to sort of work more closely with people we link up with, like local schools, local other organisations, and even some of the bigger organisations. But because we're grassroots and we're on the ground, so to speak, we can help in, I think, in a more kind of direct way, rather than just having an overall kind of umbrella approach.
Amazing. Thank you so much, both. Did any of the other panelists wants to come in on relationship building? Brenda, go for it.
Yeah, one of the things that we realise with relationships is that there's people that are within groups that are kind of quite pivotal to keeping the conversations going. So we have, usually we work through partnerships, but we've actually identified people across the city that actually are really good at this, building it from, you know, their own neighbourhoods. So we have actually, instead of just going through partnerships with our work, and actually contacting people who have really contributed and are supportive with others and are seen as really a real resource to their neighbourhoods.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brenda. Resource is the word. It's tapping into that power and empowering people. Kay, there was a specific question for you about relationships, is how you're building relationships with the local farmers that you talked about working with. Are you able to talk to that, please?
Yes. So we've been working with farmers for quite a while. I'm originally from a farming community in Lancashire. And so it was great to sort of tap into those relationships that I had from years and years ago. I went away for a long time and I came back. When we set the cafe up, we specifically wanted to work with small local farmers and buy directly from them. So we'd already done quite a lot of the groundwork. And then we've kind of built up connections. We're involved with the Landwork Alliance and the NFU. So we're constantly having conversations outside Lancashire with other organisations about how to work with farmers. It's not always that easy because farmers are notoriously busy and they're working and they don't really necessarily want to get involved in some of the conversations that might not lead anywhere. So we've built up, it's taken a while, but we've kind of built up quite a good relationship now. Is that okay? Is there anything else that you want me to expand on?
That's perfect. Okay. There was one other question for you, was around how you make the food affordable. So if you go for it.
Brilliant question. Well, you actually, it's almost impossible. It needs to be subsidised. So what we've been doing over Christmas and Easter is we've been issuing people who have been part of our programme with vouchers. So they could go to the markets themselves and buy the produce with the vouchers, but it's been for very specific items as part of a cooking class. But what we want to develop that into through our work with the Open Food Network is allow people to choose what they want, but it needs to be subsidised. So we're now talking to lots of different organisations. We're going to be doing some financial modelling to look at how much that subsidy would need to be, and to run a pilot, how many people we would need to test that out with. So we're working on that at the moment. We've got an application for some funding in, which we're hoping will allow us to set something up that will, it's like a community shares, using cryptocurrency and blockchain technology, which I don't really understand, but we're hoping that that can in some way subsidise our discounted food cards in some way. But what we definitely don't want to do is push prices down for farmers anymore. So the prices will be, we're looking at the true cost of food here. And this is the difficulty, is a paradox. We want to support our farmers, but we have a huge issue in Preston with food poverty.
Yeah,
it doesn't really answer the question because I don't know what the answer is, but we're working on it.
Yeah, no, I understand. Everyone's working on it in different ways. I think we could probably do another hour of webinar on what on earth the cryptocurrency funding model is that's going on there. So that we'll put that aside for another time. But you have looped us into next question around funding, because there's been a few questions on that. I think it would be great to hear a bit more about how you're working with local authorities and how local authorities are funding your work, and then what you have planned to make this sustainable going forward, because recognizing that food power and that funding has come from the lottery, so I must say thanks to the lottery for that. But in terms of going forward, how do you plan or hope to be able to fund this work? So Ali, I'm going to start with you just to bring you back into the room, and then we'll go around.
Sure, yes. Well, there is, as I'm sure with everyone else's projects, there is a whole machinery of fundraising alongside all of this that happens in parallel. But we worked very closely with the local authority right from the outset. So we were one of the 8 organizations that got together with Southwark Council right at the beginning of the pandemic to coordinate the pandemic response. So just as I said, we worked with our neighborhood partners to do referrals to us of people that they already had trusting relationships with. So the council trusted us to be the holder and convener of that relationship with our local partners, and did the same with 7 or 8 other neighborhoods. So they've been part of this journey from the outset, both their public health team and also their community support teams. And the conversations that started then about how do we streamline the relationships of trust that are already there, alongside the safety issues of data, for example, and how they're shared. So we set it up so that data is owned by a democratically accountable body, i.e. the council, and we get the parts that we need to be able to do the work that we do. And so these conversations have continued and formed into the neighborhood model, some of which they are funding, as you saw in my last slide. And we are also working across the rest of our borough through the Southwark Food Action Alliance to look at what a neighborhood model like this, that's why I wanted to talk more about the context and the model itself, because to look at what it would look like in other neighborhoods. And that work is very much supported by Southwark, and they're thinking about going forward, looking at trialing this model across the borough, across different neighborhoods. We're also part of the GLA's, the London Mayor's Food Routes Incubator Programme. So we got some funding from them, and as part of that are part of a larger network within London of people working on food. So we have some support from there. As you saw, there is a circularity built into the model. So we are hoping, I agree that it's probably a bit optimistic to say that it will be fully self-funding and self-sufficient, but we're working towards that to see how much money we can generate and how much of the local spend we can refunnel back into building community resilience. We also have all the usual other stuff, grant funding, donor drives and everything else.
Amazing. Thanks very much, Ali. High hopes for sustainability there. Brenda, do you want to talk about funding?
Yeah, I think it was someone asked me right away about funding. It is a really mixed bag, but one of the things that people are saying are really powerful. You can't hide from these conversations that are going on. So it's let us go back to city partners and back to funders with real life situations and conversations that are live in the city and actually prompt to action. So, gauge what the tone is out there. So, I've put in the chat there that even there was something like school uniforms, people didn't know how to access school uniform vouchers. So, our closed group chats were saying, right, okay, here's the form. This is what you need to fill in, and sharing it with our other networks. So, so there is that kind of real life evidence. The other thing that's happened is that, we've been establishing it for 25 years. We source from East Lothian farms. Our procurement and our ability to deliver on price is a lot better than a lot of statutory bodies because we're not tied into a procurement contract. So I've just bought 400 hand blenders for the community when I seen them at a really great price, cheaper than Lidl and Aldi. Now, our council partners can't do that. We have done that for the summer programs. And, it's having that almost that autonomy that makes us a more attractive, partnership to, get things out to people in an economic way. So.
Yeah, magic. Thanks very much, Brenda. I'm just aware of time. So one thing that we've got one more question, but one thing I did want to flag is that I'm aware that there's quite so many people here that we can't have breakout groups like we normally would for our kind of workshops and webinars, but we're trying to capture your input via Mentimeter wherever possible. So I've just shared a link in the chat to a Mentimeter, and it would be great if you can click on that link or use your phone to go to menti.com and use that code to access. And we're just asking what you think is key to making genuine local food resilience a reality, because we've heard from these wonderful 5 presentations about what local food resilience looks like in their areas and how they're trying to develop it. But it'd be great to get your input too and get your thoughts so we can share that with you all after the event. And with that in mind, I'm just going to throw this back to the speakers for the last question. So if you could all just do a kind of an easy 30-second summary of what you think is key to making local food resilience a reality, that would be fab. I'll start with Sahida.
Hello. I just wanted to say in terms of the food resilience, because the project we're working on is quite niche and it's tailored to the BAME community, we have to be realistic. Like, although we're opening an eco-stroke community shop, it's not going to be fully sustainable because there isn't going to be the surplus food every week delivered that is tailored to the BAME community. There will be all the store-covered essentials and household items and stuff, but we are still going to have to fund the certain items that they would need, albeit at a subsidised cost. But we intend on working quite closely with local independent shops, and often they have items that are close to the use by date or best before date, and they'll be more than willing to probably donate them to us because they do that at the moment. And also to try and work with some larger established like supermarkets and other organisations to ask if they can from other areas source some of their items that they sell in supermarkets to help us here locally in Teesside, because although we're now getting a larger BAME community similar to cities, we don't have that same sort of link in the supermarkets with the food that they sell. So we're not able to source as many kind of what you'd say BAME focused items. I think that's the route that we want to go down I think because that's the only way we'll be able to make it a bit more sustainable.
Yeah, thanks, Zahida, for that point. It's really good because it's not as easy for all projects, is it, to just seek fair share support? It needs a wider network. So thank you very much. Do you want to share kind of 1 or 2 points about what you think we can do to make genuine local food resilience a reality? Would that be your point?
I think to make it more resilient, I think in each area has to adopt a different model to suit that area. I think sort of one model fits all approach isn't how it works, because each area has a different infrastructure, each area has different suppliers or shops, or has a different community that they need to tailor it to. So I think what's important is to work with a lot of the grassroots community projects to get their input in what works in their area, and then to try and share it with other areas that perhaps are a similar size or have similar kind of infrastructure, because I think they're the sort of level of people that know what is actually needed. Because I don't think you can have a generic approach, because a model we're adopting is different to another community shop, even if it's like about 2-3 miles away. They might have a different demographic than we're sort of tailoring to. I think that's what's important.
Yes, no, it's very true. It's not a one size fits all approach. That is not conducive to resilience, and involving people with experience is vital too. Thank you so much, Zahida. Sonia, do you have just 30 seconds of what is key to making genuine local food resilience a reality?
Sure. I mean, I think in Leeds, we feel it's really important to have a shared vision for the city. So we're all moving along in the same direction of travel, but also an understanding that there will always be emergency provision available for people that need it. But then as we develop pathways to move people along to a more normalized shopping experience. And I think building on what Zahida said is that, you know, communities have the assets and the resources to respond best to their community need. But we also need to build greater relationships with local businesses and allotments and other local food resources, and take a community approach to looking after the community.
Yeah, magic. Thank you, Sonia. Kay, what do you think is needed to make local food resilience genuine reality?
I think in the long term, what we need to do is get food education back into schools. And that's something that we're going to be talking about next. Amongst ourselves, we've got a situation where children are leaving school, they don't know how to cook a meal. And I think when you've got demand and people understand the work that we've done through our Kids in the Kitchen programme, we talk to people, we get feedback from them all the time. And there's a real enthusiasm for local food and for people getting involved in cooking and getting out of the situations that they find themselves in. And so I think if we could get that back into schools, which it was a while ago, when I've been kind of around since 1996, I started working with schools, and there were some really good programs then. So I think we need to get that back, and I think that will people, as I say, from our experience, do want to get involved. They want to know where the food comes from, and they want to be proactive.
Yeah, excellent points. Thanks very much, Kay. Okay, I know we're over time, but I think it's important to hear from all the speakers. So I am going to move to Ali. And obviously, if you do have to head off somewhere, goodbye and thank you for coming. Ali, over to you.
Yeah, I think my presentation might have given it away what we think is the key. It's really systemic thinking and a network approach, so that everyone doesn't have to think of the entire chain, and they can focus on their area of expertise within a wider ecosystem, but of course mixed with local adaptations that Zahida and others were talking about. That's also very important. The food resilience in different areas would look very differently.
Yeah, perfect. Very succinct. Thank you very much, Ali. Nita, you're muted.
You think I would know by now, 18 months on. In terms of food resilience, how I perceive it, it is something we have to do together. We have to do it with the growing partners. We have to do it with the people that are doing food projects. We have to make sure that we're getting the information out there. But also what sits behind that, I think, is the knowledge and understanding at the level of the community. They need to understand what it is we're doing and why it's going to benefit them. And sometimes food resilience isn't about the food element, it's about understanding the wider problem a family or a group or a project is facing. It isn't always about food. Food resilience in an area can be the last thing a family or a group are thinking about because there's so many other social problems. So that isn't their priority, and it's finding a way to use the community hubs or the community shops as a way to infiltrate that information, because our evidence for the last 15 months, about everybody else's will have been at Little Sprouts, is that people are coming to us for food, not only because they need food, but because they have a lot of other social issues around that. So it's making sure the right support and infrastructure is there. I really love the model that's been talked about today about the growing and bringing the food to growing as part of that. And that forms a really tight knit instead of it as a separate entity. So in Stockton, I believe as we move through and give the Stockton Food Power Network more empowerment, this will enable people to become more empowered. So people who are part of growing initiatives and food initiatives can talk to each other more. So that's what I would envisage and hope to be part of.
Yeah, amazing. Thanks so much, Nita. And last but not least, Brenda. And Brenda, while you talk, I hope you don't mind, but I'm going to share my screen so we can see what other people have been sharing as well. But please do share your insights.
No worries. Okay. I think that the first thing I start off is don't underestimate the power of food. You know, we've just came through the pandemic. It's the thing that connected people the most, and we continue to use food as the vehicle and not let people, because obviously we're moving from that sort of stage of food assurance to food insurance. So food when you absolutely need it, and then, you know, maybe at times in your life you maybe don't need it, but the system is already set up in there if you do need it. But really continue to value the connections that food allows you to make, and that really carries on from what everybody else was saying, especially Nita there at the end. We still need to provide food to piggyback the rest of the resources that we need to provide to keep a city and to keep people connected and more resilient.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brenda. And thank you so much to all of our speakers for talking today and sharing your insights and sharing your work. It's been great, and that's proven by all of the good feedback in the chat box. So just to finish up, we obviously asked you that same question, and there's been some great comments. So a dedicated coordination and resource, working with local grassroots community-based organizations, which comes back to what many of our speakers have said, thinking systemically. So, you know, it's system change, and local change can start system change. So it's thinking about systemic issues and not just siloing things. Co-production, food education training for primary and secondary teachers. So obviously Kay talked a bit about that. And one good question is, I'm not sure, do we know about food resilience in local areas? And yeah, it's a good question. Maybe we don't yet. So maybe there's more work to be done. And I hope that that's where some of this food power work and some of these pilot projects can help provide a bit of an understanding. So as I say, we'll be sure to share the findings from that when we get that far. The integration of support to reduce food poverty within the community. Food system must support transition towards resilience. Yes, it's all about that system change. So I'll stop sharing my screen, and I will share the link to see the results of that in the chat now, so you can come back to it when you like. So I think that's it. So I thank you again so much to all of our speakers and to everyone that spared the time. I'm sorry about this slight delay in getting that link out to you, but hopefully you've got the rest for your day. We did say at the beginning that after this session, there is a chance to go to the Wonder Space. So if you do want to go to the Wonder Space, it would be great to, oh, what have I done there? Oh, this is the fun of the virtual world, hey, constant confusion. I think the Wonder Space, if you haven't used it yet, is our online networking space for the festival. So with any conference, you go to a conference and you meet people and you build, you build relationships and you schmooze around the snacks. sadly, we've got no snacks for you, but we do have that networking space where you can go. It's similar to Zoom, but it has more freedom in that you can move around and join different circles and talk to different people. So speakers, I know you're probably busy, but if you do fancy going to the Wonder Space and continuing conversations, then you'd be very welcome. And attendees, if there is anything you want to pick up, or, you know, just kind of go and have a chat with Simon, who's the head of the Food Power program. He's currently there waiting with a cup of tea to see if anyone joins and fancies the chat. So I've put the link to it in the chat, but I'll repeat it again. We do have a guide in case it's not clear how to use it, so let me share that as well. But otherwise, thank you so much. And I'll leave this open just in case you want